Thank you for joining us on this episode of Legal Angle with Emmanuel Olawale. Welcome to this episode. My guest today is is a professor of English and literature, Dr. Adeleke Adeeko. He's the chairman of the African American Studies at the Ohio State University. Welcome to the show, Doctor.
Thank you, Mr. Lawale. Tony, thank you very much for this pleasure. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for coming. Today we're going to be talking about Black studies matter, white matters, and its relationship with other areas of Black lives. But before we go into that topic of discussion, we'll be remiss if we do not recognize that today itself is a new dawn in American history with the election of Joe Biden Jr.
Yeah.
and Kamala Harris as the next president and vice president of the United States. In fact, Kamala Harris would be the first Black and first female vice president.
Yeah.
So, and it was, today marks an historical day. So, what are your thoughts about the election results and the president-elect and the vice president-elect?
This has been a happy day for me, and if you've been watching the media, what's going on national media, it's been a happy day for a lot of people all over the country. And for the topic we are discussing today, for the theme of Black studies and Black lives, it couldn't have been more auspicious day. When we were planning this a while back, no one knew that it would be a momentous day like this, that this will hold. So it's personally for me, I can't contain how happy I have been. It's been a relief, big relief. Imagining 4 years of what we have gone through for the last 4 years was stressful. Just imagining what it will be for the next 4 years was very, very stressful thinking about it. So it's a big relief for me. I look forward to grace. I look forward to some civility in the way we talk, in the way Black people in particular are described and spoken about, that the first woman to become the vice president of this society, of this country, is a Black woman. It's historic, very, very historic, but it also affirms the legacy, long legacy, usually unrecognized, unnoticed, unrecorded, of the way Black women have carried the burden of moving this society along forever. Since the beginning, how they've kept things together for the society. And people dump on Black women all sort of issues that are our own difficulties, but they hold Black women responsible unduly for it. So I'm really, really happy that history again is repeating itself, and that for at least this time, they are being recognized. Black women are being recognized for the mayor of Atlanta. It's not accidental. That actually it's good that what brings all this joy is related to the work Black women have done to mobilize, to hold things, to lead people. This is the right way. This is the way to go. They've been doing it forever, as I said, since the beginning of this society. But it waits for this long for it to be recognized. And I'm happy it is that it's recognized, that today is that day.
Yeah, indeed. The hard work of Black women comes to recognition with this election. And the irony, I also find it ironic that we have an outgoing president who is blatantly anti-immigrant, who fanned the flame of authorism, which the authorism is the belief that the first African American president of the United States was not legitimate because he wasn't born in the United States. So the irony of it is now the daughter of an immigrant,
Yeah.
not even far
Yeah.
from their immigration from Jamaica and from India,
Yeah.
will now be taken over as vice president.
Yeah.
The my question to you, that what is the cognizance, taking into cognizance, the, like you said, the historical nature of how Black women have been the one bearing the burden of slavery,
Yeah.
bearing the burden of mass incarceration, bearing the burden of high unemployment rate among Black men.
Yeah.
What is that? What are your thoughts with that historical significance that we now have the daughter of an immigrant, female,
Yeah.
Black,
Yeah.
now stepping into the shoes of the second powerful woman or person in the world?
Yeah. As far as I'm concerned, she's the most powerful woman in the world. Beginning January 21, she will become between third week in January. She will Kamala Harris will become the most powerful woman on earth in terms of being close, the kind of things she could do, the kind of symbolic power she carries. But to get back to the point you raised earlier on what has been the role of Black women, I said since slave times. Uh, Look, Black women have kept the Black society together since the beginning. They were the one who's there because you see, Black males during slavery could be disposed easily. They could be sold. But because children took after the status of their mother during slavery, Black slave owners will lose more if they were to sell a Black woman than to sell an enslaved female than to sell an enslaved
Male.
male. Because of that, even when they raped the Black women, they kept them to rape them, to bear children. Black women were property that bore property. It's unique. A cow is like a cow bringing back a cow, or a hoe, a piece of digging tool. Digging tools don't reproduce. You make them. But somehow they turned Black women into machines that were producing slaves. So, and when they rape them, they make sure that the status of the children is not after the father, as patriarchal as a male centered as society was. This isolated Black women for that purpose, so that they became property that are bearing property.
They were
So
men for breeding.
they were the one that kept the group together. The only constant you have is the Black woman from slave time till now.
Yeah.
During in Jim Crow, Black men would not be employed, but they would allow Black women to work in the innermost part as domestics. But they will still not grant recognition to the great work that Black women did. The sufferings. Look at the case of Tom Thurmond. Thurmond, I think that's his name, the senator from one of the Carolinas. He died a few years back.
Yeah.
This man had a Black,
the segregationist.
Yeah, ran as a segregationist president and had a Black daughter with a Black woman who used to work as a domestic in their home. She slept there. She had a child with her when they said she was home from college. And this man was running. Imagine, try to put every time I try to wrap around my head around what that woman was feeling, the mother. This man had a child with this man and is running anti-Black president. That's the pain. I mean, I just can't put my head around it. It's difficult for us Black men, especially Black male immigrants, to imagine the kind of mental gymnastics, mental calculations Black women have to make. And in the case of Kamala Harris, look, around I think 1919, I'm not a lawyer, I read the case of one Indian, South Asian, to apply for citizenship, he had to claim his white. for a South Asian to qualify for citizenship, he had to struggle, tumble and tumble, make legal somersaults to show that he's white, so that he's qualified. South Asian. Don't even talk about Jamaican. It's the same thing. They've been coming here, they've been working hard. It's just not recognized. So it's really a great day. I just, in all with gender, race, transnational migration, and remember South Asians and African coasts on the eastern side, even on the western coast. So she embodies what I would rightly describe the present moment for us historically.
It is a great day, especially like you said, recognizing the fact that Black women were kept as production factories to
Yeah,
produce more slaves.
yeah,
And if you also look at the background of where even our parents came from, Jamaica, Jamaica does not historically or organically have Africans.
yeah,
All the Africans you see in the West Indies, they were a product of slavery.
yeah.
So it's really a day of reckoning.
It is.
Now, let's go to what we want to talk about today, which is I think we've already started. We've
Yeah,
already started, which is that Black Studies Matter.
yeah,
Recently, Netflix released a documentary series titled "The Making of a Colony." It's about how Nigeria itself was conquered by force, colonized, and the huge mass of land containing the most populous Black Africans on that planet
yeah,
was named after the word nigger. By merging the word nigger area, they formed it, to make it Nigeria. And historically, even the origin of that word, the context of it is not even explained to most Nigerians. So, and that documentary itself is Black history, it's Black story, it's Black studies.
yeah.
So it contains so many historical significance on records that are otherwise not available that they wouldn't teach people in school, which is not atypical when it comes to Black history. As you know, as because it is the Black history is contaminated by colonialism, by slavery, and by imperialism. Can you shed more light on this concept?
Yeah, when I became the interim chair of African American Studies here at OSU, middle of August, I chose for myself that for the next 2 years that I intend to serve as interim chair, that Black Studies Matter is going to be the essential term that I want to use to organize my activities, the activities of my colleagues, and in speaking, representing the department, our business to other people. Why? It's partly related to what you just said now. That you need to know, for a long time, Black people were, anyway, for a long time in this society at least, actually it was illegal. Actually, that's a common fact now. Everybody knows that. It was illegal for a Black person to go to school. You cannot teach a Black person to read or write.
No, which is a crime, even if you're white.
It's a crime to teach a Black person to read or write. In 1961 or in the early 60s, Ruby Bridges, National Guard escorted her, a child, to go to school, to be in a school where she could be with others. Some parents withdrew their kids because they didn't want their kids to be with other kids or with a Black kid in school. As late as 1962, University of Mississippi, Black undergraduates couldn't get to school. They couldn't enter there. They couldn't go there. But again, on the other side, we need not forget historically Black colleges and universities. Kamala Harris went to Howard.
Yes.
So we should. There used to be alternative locations that Black folks have always created for themselves here to nurture and that's what's happening in the case of the documentary you just mentioned about Nigeria. I do not know about you. I went to school when I was in school in Nigeria. I'm trying to connect the two coasts now, the two sides of the Atlantic, in relation to this lack of knowing about ourselves and Black studies. If you don't go to school, what do you learn? I mean, what do you teach? And when you go to school, what is being taught there? We learned that, we were told that a European explorer, Mungo Park, I don't know if you remember him.
Yeah,
From
discovered River Niger.
yeah,
Yes.
discovered the River Niger.
And Lolugad amalgamated Nigeria. Meanwhile,
Nigeria.
Lolugad
Yeah,
was the, what will I call him? He was a genocidal
yeah, yeah,
terrorist,
yeah,
conqueror.
yeah. And you know, again, in relation to Kamala Harris, Lugard earned his peeps in India. He
Yes.
started in India. Then they sent him to Uganda. Then from Uganda, he came to Nigeria. So you see these same
The
people, you
connection.
see the same criminals everywhere historically. Mungo Park, they told us, discovered River Niger. Who showed him around?
Hmm.
He didn't come with his boats. So he navigated the River Niger up to, then he perished in New Busa in Nigeria.
Nimbusa.
Yeah.
Yes.
He traveled from sending from today's Mali to Nigeria. He didn't know the place. People, he had 3 boats. Who paddled him? But we were not taught that. It was and what that teaches us about issue of Black studies and how Black studies revise things related to Black life and rewrite it, to rewrite and check and correct it for accuracy. That it is wrong to say that Mungo Park discovered River Niger when there were people who led him around and actually showed him around and told him this is where to move your boats and so on and so forth. So it's that kind of doing making discoveries, constructing knowledge about Black people in ways that will show the activities, the true state of things with Black people, how Black people have invented themselves and how they keep creating themselves up till now, and how, unfortunately, we spend a lot of time in Black studies correcting the evil.
Education.
Yeah, the miseducation as the miseducation of the Negro. Carter G. Woodson, he's an African American historian, wrote this famous book. Not too thick. It's a book I would recommend. The Miseducation of the Negro. That's it. We have to spend a lot of time correcting the miseducation that has gone on. The miseducation that continues today, the miseducation that will lead a policeman in the United States to see every Black male unarmed as a threat. So the miseducation has been going on for a long, long, long time. That still continues till today. Unfortunately, that Black studies, we have to spend a lot of time correcting that. Then the other side is actually showing, yeah, it's wrong. We have to you have to teach the soul, to teach the mind, to look for ways of contesting every inch, every aspect of the way the black people have been made to understand themselves, self-understanding.
That is very deep. There has to be a lot of unlearning to
Yeah,
be able to learn the truth.
yeah,
For instance, the way the going back to that Nigerian story as an example,
yeah,
imagine a whole nation named after a derogatory sobriquet,
yeah,
which is like a nigger area.
yeah,
And yet, when the country was handed over, the people they handed it over to, they got so comfortable with that name that they never even thought of changing it.
yeah,
The same thing happened in like Zimbabwe, but they were able to recognize the historical nature of their name, Rhodesia, and they changed it to something that has to do with them, which is from Rhodesia to Zimbabwe.
yeah,
But Nigeria never got to do that.
yeah.
So how can blacks, either in Africa or in the diaspora, discover their authentic history?
Black studies. And I'm saying that not as a slogan, not as a way of just speaking. No, I'm not creating an advertisement, but Black studies is necessary for self-understanding. You need self-understanding first. You mentioned the case of Nigeria. Black people, especially in terms of naming that you mentioned, even here in this society, tell me of any group that cares about what they are called more than Black people. No other group. So when people make fun of African American names, you guys don't know what they're talking about. Self-naming is critical, which Africans unfortunately now want to mark by saying Niger area, that we should forget. You cannot forget Niger. You are called Niger area.
You cannot forget it.
You shouldn't forget it. What you call it, what people call you or what you call yourself is critical, because you are telling them what to call you. You are answering. You need to tell them not to call me that, because your name, the name you choose, you call yourself, or what other people call you. You use your own mouth to reject that which you should not eat, which is a translation of a Yoruba saying. Yeah, you must use your own mouth to reject that which you don't want to eat. If you keep taking it, they will think you love it. They will think you love it. It's unfortunate. Rhodesia, at least they changed their name to Zimbabwe. But after changing the name, then we do something. Look, I tell my students every time in class, you will not see an African name his or her child Pebbles. You will call yourself a mountain, but not a piece of stone. You're not Pebbles. It's only in Flintstones that somebody will call your child Pebbles. I would rather call my child a mountain, because that's aspiration. Names are aspirations. They are what you want to be. They are projections. You need to be comfortable with it. You can't be calling myself. You can't call me a nigger and not expect to fight. That Nigerians are allowed to be called nigger area for so long we're shirking some responsibility.
I think it's the miseducation, because a lot of people don't even know.
Yeah.
Because we're taught in school that we were named after the river Niger.
Yeah.
But without even people digging into how was that river named?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the longest river. So it's still the expression of the long black, the population of the people define the area.
Yeah, it does.
Which is the largest area of the concentration of Black people. Yeah. And historically, too, we're seeing the effect of it, because even from that documentary, too, we're meant to understand that about 20% of the population of the people at that time were enslaved. So, which means most of them are in the Americas, most of them are in the West Indies, most of them are our brothers and sisters now who cannot trace their roots.
Yeah.
So the historical nature of that name and the geographic area, we're still feeling the impact.
Yeah. Yeah, especially that there are local names. River Niger is Oduoya in Yoruba. Correct. It's not always been River Niger. So the Rider of Niger, from which it came from, actually is recent. So there is nothing wrong in reversing it. Actually, the best thing is to up till today, those who don't go to school, who if you want to speak Yoruba, those are crossing River Niger. You see, we call people who are north of Niger, we call Okeoya in Yoruba, the upper part of the Oya River. Shada River, that's what they used to call Benue River, had local names. So that's the longer, talking, as you said, that's the major river basin in West Africa. It drains into the Niger Delta. The oil wealth of Niger Delta is part of that drainage, that major drainage system. So it's not just ideological, it's a central part of the lives of people.
From what we keep talking about, history is all about defining identities. For people raised with false histories, they tend to have problems with their identities, because it's not proper, because you don't even know who you really are. So if you don't know who you really are, how can you even know what your ancestors have gone through or have done, or how can you even honor them? So what are your thoughts on the nexus between cultural and national identity and history and Black studies?
If you want to govern a people, if you want to dominate them, it's not by force of arms. Force of arms could only be temporary to dominate a people. If you want to enslave a people, chains can only last for a while. Actually, people enchained do commit suicide. They do kill themselves with a chain. Shoyinka's Death and the King's Horseman, a play in 1975. The guy in the more or less the villain in the end, he killed him. He killed himself with his chain. So the point I'm trying to make with that is that the force of arms is never adequate to hold the people down, but the force of culture does. That's because the force of culture is in the mind. It's like GPS, the example I like to say. It tells you where to go. It tells you what is right. It tells you what is wrong. It tells you how to behave. So when you want to dominate a people, you take hold of their mind first. And one of the ways you hold their mind, you seize their mind is through education. Either schooling, church, home, culture, religion, ways of dressing, the names they call themselves, the way they present. You need to seize hold of that. That's the way to subject them. When people start questioning that, rulers become afraid. When you start to make, so when we say we are fighting cultural independence, cultural war, war of history, of representation, I don't see them as mere cultures. I want to recommend we don't see them as mere culture. Black studies activism is not just mere culture, it's a struggle for the mind. If your mind has been miseducated, for a long time, colonial education, education associated with slavery, education associated with Jim Crowism, it's designed to make the Black person question the idea of being Black. Up till today, Black food, you denigrate it. Black, I'm a Black cuisine. Black music, you denigrate it until you can make money out of it. Then it becomes something else. Then they've seized it. Then Black drama, Black faith, Black philosophy, Black thinking. Actually, for a long time, Blackness represented the absence of thought, the absence of logic. Not because Black people don't think, not that Black people are not logical, but what Black people call logic was simply declared by those who designed schools and educational systems as illogical, as non-philosophical. And for a long time, Black people accepted it. Because if you don't accept it, your body will be severely punished. You'll be declared a bad subject. You'll be declared a rebel. And you know what we do to a rebel? When we call somebody a rebel, it's like calling somebody a terrorist now. You're done. That means they're willing to dispose of your body just because you ask questions about those issues. Fortunately, things are, let me give one favorite example of mine. The idea of Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a phrase, a term from South Africa and from the Central African to South African forest regions of Africa. I am because you are. It's nothing could be more ethically sound. That's sound philosophy of being. It's a theory of being, a theory of existence. But until recently, it was dismissed as mere proverbial, that there is no wisdom in it. Nothing could be more deeply philosophical than I am because you are. It's a theory of being, a theory of social relations. In Yoruba, they will call it ajobi, ajogbe, living together and being born together. These are deep critical terms that for a long time we just dismissed. Oh, it's just nonsense. Because as far as they are concerned, for a long time, it was no. That's what Black studies do. To help you self-question, to question and also relate it to life. How things are, how things should be. For a long time, we just dismissed our ways of being. Just dismissed. Yeah, it was irrational. Black faith was irrational. Even when they adopted Christianity, when we adopt Christianity and we practice, people practice Christianity or Islam, even Islam, because Islam predates Christianity by centuries in African societies. You can't do the Sufi tradition in Islam is African. But when now Africans turn to the Middle East for authority on Sharia law, because they've been bred to believe that, and they overlook the Sufi tradition from Sudan to Senegal. They don't talk about it. Africans they've been writing in Ajami script, which is Africanized version of Arabic script. There are novels in Yoruba, in Ilorin, written in Ajami script. But we've been bred, schools have bred us to the same thing here for a long time. Black theology doesn't exist. The way black people think of Christian theology differently. Christian theology in African Americans, the history is liberation. Look at the old songs. Look at the old songs. Swing low, swing chariot. Come for to carry me home. Go down, Moses. Tell old Pharaoh, let my people go. Look, they were not thinking about Egypt. They knew they were not living in Egypt. That's deep liberation thought. But for a long time, it was dismissed.
Yeah. Because the Christianity or the Black Christianity in the US is more mosaic than it is Christ-like.
It has to be. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it has to be.
Yeah. And the word Ubuntu too, that was just so disregarded. If you look at it from the Christian point of view, it's the same thing as love your neighbor as yourself.
Exactly.
But then because that one has a Jewish kind of
roots,
root, so it's more acceptable.
So for a long time, they would say, well, it was simple. Even African philosophers thought they called it ethnography. There was a long debate used to be a debate among African philosophers, ethnophilosophy and philosophy. So they will call the other one ethics or morality. But Ubuntu, they would dismiss as ethnophilosophy or as ethnography. Even African philosophers. Because that's the way schooling works. Schooling reiterates the norm. That's the way the school teaches you to affirm what is operative. Black studies was an intrusion. Actually, it came from the community history. It got into the university by demands made by people. For a long time, I teach literature, I teach English. We will not call it song poem. We'll say it's just a song. It's a ritual. It's a song. It's not a poem. That's not true. In many, many African societies, the word for poem and song is the same. So if you choose not to do that, then it's Black studies that brought that to the forefront. Again, here, listen to the poetry, read them, see what happens in the fiction. You don't just tell a story for the sake of telling stories. Who does that? But for a long time, that's what people were taught. Yeah, just tell a story for the sake of telling stories. Who does that? You tell stories for a reason. Nobody speaks just for the sake of speaking. You recite incantations to change the world. You sing hymns to praise because you want to reorient yourself. You want to change the world. It's that world-changing element that's the intrusion Black studies caused in the Western Academy, and we are still dealing with the effect. We all belong to it. I see myself as part of the Western Academy. I don't see myself as outside of it because that's what I do. But you have to speak two languages, the language of the other, and the language of the outside and the language of the inside. Unfortunately, you are a lawyer, so you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You have to speak the language of the street when you get to court. I mean, you have to speak, you have to make things clear to the jury. So, yeah.
Yeah, Black literature has always faced backlash, rejection from even the time of slavery. Because I remember when Frederick Douglass released his autobiography, they said that he couldn't, there's no way a black man could have written such a detailed, well written book. When Olaudah Equiano released his own autobiography too in England, it came, he went through the same attack. Like, how can a black African write so good in the language of the slave master or the, yeah.
I'm, I'm,
So
I'm glad you brought those two people up. That's Douglas and Equiano. For a long time, nobody knew. When Equiano said in that book, I am from southeastern Nigeria,
it's from Nigeria, yes.
that was a scholar who said no, that he couldn't have come from southeastern Nigeria. There's a short document. He came up with birth certificate. He was born in South Carolina. As far as I'm concerned, he called himself a southeastern Nigerian. That's enough for me. When students ask, what do you think? I said, that's enough for me. Identity is what you call yourself. He identified 1789 as a southeastern Nigerian. That's okay with me. That's enough for me. But we cannot, because of the significance of today, Phyllis Whitley, the second woman ever in the United States to publish a book of poetry. Second woman ever. 1773. Poems on various subjects. The only person before her was Anne Bradstreet. Look, Anne Bradstreet and Phyllis Whitley. Anne Bradstreet was the daughter of a governor, married to a governor. So next to her is a slave who published the first book of poetry in this country by a black person was Phyllis Whitley. By any American woman, second woman ever, Phyllis Whitley. And you know what she had to go through in Boston? They hired doctors of divinity to test her that she's actually the author. That woman got to Boston at the age of 8. Historians actually said she was probably just an addition. Okay, you want this mother, you want this woman, this little one, take her with you. But she survived. She got to Boston at the age of 8. By 15, she was already reading Latin. She's a genius. So for today, for Kamala Harris, we have to go back to her. The kind of things that black women have been doing, but which historical for a long time. We just dismiss, we'll teach 2 poems from Phyllis Whitley and move on. But now it's not possible because of the effect of black studies. Yeah.
Yeah. Because black intellectualism has always been under attack,
Yeah.
either by Western education, it's always been under attack. So for a black person to even receive any kind of recognition intellectually, you have to be super above average.
Yeah.
Your work have to be perfect. And these are even the people that we are able to name because their work became prominent. We don't know how many of those good writers,
Yeah.
great intellectuals, that they killed their dream by just banning their work, by dismissing it, and just writing it off as mediocre work.
Yeah. They say this is not poetry. You call this poetry? Yeah. You call this a novel? This is not a novel. Yeah. Just because it doesn't sound the way they want it to sound. Oh, Ajayi Crowther Ajayi Crowther in our own homeland.
Samuel Ajayi Crowther.
Samuel Ajayi Crowther. I cringe when I hear people dismiss him.
He's a multilingualist, one of the great minds that came from Africa.
You cannot write the history of global Christianity without devoting a considerable part to Samuel Ajayi Crowther. He always argued. He argued for independence. he argued for what he called native agency. That's what he called it. That the church in Africa must not depend on the Church of England. About 5 years ago, the Church of England apologized, 150 years after his death.
That's common in the West.
Yeah, the Bishop of Canterbury
it's always posthumous.
That we are sorry for the way we treated Samuel Ajayi Crowther. He insisted on native agency. But again, we are not educated. Fortunately for us, Black studies is not bringing. Ajayi Crowther was an explorer. He went along with the British. He wrote detailed studies of plant life, animal life on the Niger. There's a university name for him now.
Yeah. What has been the contribution of religion to the advancement or the lack of advancement of Black culture, Black studies, or Black history?
This is why I'm pausing, and there's a reason for that.
Yes, it's a deep question.
Yeah, it's a tough question, but it has to be addressed. I see Christianity and also Islam. We have to accept, and also Islam, as the poison that heals. I've forgotten the exact term now. It's something that that there is that like a poison that heals you. You have to take it, but it has the historical effect in African societies.
It's contaminating, and it also has a healing effect.
Yeah, at the same time. Christianity. Let me mention one guy. I'll just drop his name. Olufemi Taiwo. He's a philosopher. He teaches at Cornell. He wrote a book about 5 years ago. He called it "How Colonialism Preempted Modernity in Africa." And I agree with with Femi Taiwo's thought. I'll link this to Christianity in a second. He said before colonial rule came to West Africa, Christianity was the instrument of modernity. Schools, scientific explorations, literacy, writing. Talking of modernity as instruments, as techniques of relating to your environment. Christianity was that major instrument in West Africa. But colonialism came because the early Christians were not racists. They didn't go to Africa as racists. Right or wrong, they went there to convert. Colonialism poisoned the water, and racism poisoned the water. Don't misunderstand me. Christianity was mind control. I am not each. Look, they dismissed everything that was there as ungodly.
Demonic.
It's devilic. It's devilish. You have no idea of God. So we give you one God. And that's one of the tricks that Christianity played in West Africa. Africa, you worship 1,000 gods. And somebody told you that you need only one and you accepted it. What kind of poor bargain is that? It's a terrible bargain. You have 1,000 gods, you offend one, you go to the next one. So the gods are competing actually for your interest. They are competing for your devotion. These people came and told us only one. It was a bad bargain that Africans accepted. And I'm serious about that. And Africans shouldn't have accepted that bargain. Because now you became an abject, your relationship with the divinity becomes abject. You are at his mercy or her mercy. Whereas before, actually the gods obey you. Hey, my dear divinity, if you cannot aid me, leave me the way I am.
I'll go to the next one.
Yeah, you go to the next one, but now you cannot, because there's only one God. And there's only one path to him. And I'm speaking intellectually here. I'm not trying to preach or denigrate Christianity. I am a child of Christianity. Everything I am today was of Christian schools. Christian church. I'm still a member of my home church in Nigeria, which I've not worshipped in 30 years. I pay my membership because I value that institution a lot. I learned from that institution right from wrong in conjunction with my parents. I went to school there. The first prizes I ever got in my life are in the institutions sponsored by churches. So I really, really hold them in high regard. But at the same time, we hold them culpable. And you can only do that through critical knowledge, through critical thinking, which ironically also the church taught us. I learned critical thinking. I began my critical thinking with under the auspices of the church. So that's why I call the church a healing poison in African societies. What is left, what we need to do is, if I were to choose today, I'll follow. Unfortunately, I don't think I follow very well enough. I hope my people don't hear me saying that. I don't follow well enough the Christian tenet. I'll follow some part of Christian tenet and remain the critical element and retain the critical thinking element of Christianity. Ask questions. Ask questions. You must not surrender your mind. That's my issue. That's my problem with the way churches are done today. Is that, and not just, also mosques. See what's happening in northern Nigeria, all over the Sahara, all the Savannah belt. Also here too. Don't surrender your mind to your pastor. Christianity is the only faith I know that says, and I think that's why Black people embraced it all over. It promised you a direct access to the divinity. You do not need your priest to be saved. You do not need your priest to go to heaven. That was radical in those days. It's still a radical idea today. But somehow that radical element of Christianity, which I think was what attracted that faith to our people, that you don't need a king to go to heaven. You don't need the permission of your priest to make it, which is the opposite of what they now practice. And I think that's where the fault is, that making the priest the center of worship instead of the divine. That's my view. That's the only thing I could say about Christianity. It's a hidden poison.
I know, yeah, most of the Western religion or the Aramaic religion, they were meant as a tool to culturize people, to colonize them, to re-educate them, to make them a part of their own culture. Because you can only control a group of people or make them feel like yours if you share the same, if you have something in commonality. And the common thing that, religion is a huge part of that. And if everything that you've ever had, they told you is wrong, and they give in exchange, they give you what is theirs. And from generation to generation, you keep it on to your children. That itself is a religious genocide. Then they give you their own, they give you their language too, cultural genocide. It's just like you said, the chain itself, because when we look, and for us that grew up in Nigeria and not descendants of the enslaved, we look at colonization and slavery differently. But what we don't realize or recognize is that some were chained in the West. The ones that were left in Africa were not chained physically, but they were mentally restructured. They changed their culture, they changed their names, they changed their religion, they changed their gods. They changed everything that belongs to them. So they became Anglophiles, Francophone, and all those things. So now, let's move on. What do you think is the relationship between Black studies and Black activism?
Thanks. Black studies is a child of Black activism. Black studies is a child of Black activism. The oldest Black studies departments, and the one we have at OSU is one of the oldest, celebrated it's now 52 years ago that it became a department. And it's about half a century old, the oldest of Black studies universities. They emerged out of Black civil rights movement. that how come you take a degree in history, even in this society, you don't read anything about Black folks, not even slavery. Or the story of slavery was told as we were saving the savages. You read about literature, nobody taught Black literature. Sociology, American sociology, actually many people are now arguing, the history of American sociology started in Black studies. The work of W.E.B. Du Bois, when he did that monumental study, The Philadelphia Negro, which was a large sociological study. I'm talking about Philadelphia today, and the elections of they all go together. Sometimes these things work together. Du Bois, when he wrote The Philadelphia Negro, that's a founding text in American sociology today. Talking of history, Du Bois's PhD thesis, 1896, The History of Slavery, the first systematic academic account of European slavery in West Africa, 1896. It remains in print as a book today. So again, but for a long time, these were excluded. For a long time, even African historians were not reading Du Bois, because Du Bois does not belong to the European genealogy of great historians that we were taught in school. So it's Black studies that now said, look, that is actually miseducation. So Black studies came from activism. What we now need to do is not to retreat from that position. Black studies need to repay its debt. That's my own, if you could call it, crusade. Black studies need to pay its debt to Black activism. Black studies cannot disengage, cannot be too academic, such that the language you speak in the Black Academy has nothing to do with what's going on in Black Lives Matter or NSAS in Nigeria or the documentary you are talking about. How will Black studies explain what's going on and also further the life? Black studies cannot be disinterested. It has to repay its debt. It cannot retreat. It has to make its connection back to its origin in Black activism all over. And it's not just here. You can't talk of independence without talking of Pan-Africanism. You can't exclude Du Bois. You can't exclude the great European. You can't exclude Olawale Adeeko. You cannot exclude Ajayi Crowther. You cannot exclude Claudia Jones from the Caribbean. Claudia Jones, the idea of intersections of race, gender, and labor, Claudia Jones made that argument in the 40s and 50s as a leftist. She's a Jamaican immigrant. She died in England. The CLR James from Trinidad. They did a systematic inclusion, systematic critique of this society. So Claudia Jones was an activist. She didn't see herself as a scholar. Now we cannot just call ourselves legatees of Claudia Jones and not connect back to where Claudia Jones or where CLR James ended or where Du Bois ended. We cannot.
I think the more we dig deep and the more you learn about your history and story, you start to see all this connection. You see the connection between the Africans in diaspora. When I mean the diaspora, I'm talking about people in the United States, people in the Caribbean, and even the ones in Africa. They are all interconnected. And one way or the other, there was this wall created between the two to make one feel like, to lose that connection.
Yeah.
That all that itself was intentional.
Yeah.
Because that's another way to break the connection between the two set of peoples.
Yeah, it was intentional, and we contemporary immigrants, we are not living up to the aspirations of the legacy of older immigrants. Claudia Jones, CLR James, Marcus Garvey, they got himself immersed in activism here.
Yeah, I think the lack of education, contemporary education, especially in Africa, when it comes to Black struggle,
Yep.
is responsible for it
It did.
because we were raised to make us feel that we have this greatness and sense of freedom, inherent sense of freedom that we don't even know that our mind has been chained.
Yep. We don't.
Ours was more of mental slavery
Yep.
than of physical slavery. And we are chained, but we don't know that we're chained. So when we come here, we see ourselves as free without realizing that we have this invisible chain.
Yep. Yeah, you're right. For example, Black Lives Movement. I wanted to see Black churches, African churches, get involved. You cannot stand on the African communities, African groups. You have left. You are an immigrant here now. You live here. Your kids are here. And you're living here. Get involved. We have to, as you said, re-educate ourselves from the way we have been taught. We are raised on the continent to see ourselves. We need to re-educate ourselves. And I agree completely with that summation you gave. It's a matter of matter of miseducation for us, which we need to do.
I'll be educating. What is Black Studies like at the Ohio State University? Is it a set of courses, or is it something that someone can major in and get a degree out of it?
We have Black Studies. We have African American Studies major. We have up until 2 years ago, we actually had people in the PhD program. They go into great jobs after they were done, but due to funding and enrollment, we are having some issues at the graduate level. But at the undergraduate level, Black Studies major courses in Africa, courses on African America, music, television, visual, studio art, dance, theater. Don't even talk about literature. There is nothing. There are so many courses, and you could major in it or minor in it in African American and African studies. Languages, Kiswahili. We used to have one of the largest Kiswahili language programs in this country, and it's still very high there with our Kiswahili program. Zulu, Yoruba was taught for a while at the university. The same thing with culture, same thing with music, same thing with Africa. Our jazz program was very, very good. We have a new jazz group is getting back now. We are thinking of getting into new media and new collaborations that go on across the Atlantic and in the African global world. So, yeah, we welcome. Please come take our classes. Black Studies matter, and not just Black lives. Actually, to influence Black lives, you need Black Studies.
Yes, that was going to be my next question. Because how can you effectively advocate that Black Lives Matter, or be a Black activist or civil rights advocate, without understanding the historic nature of Black studies?
Yeah, yeah. You need to know. For example, when that policeman was kneeling on George Floyd's neck for 10 minutes, he was not enforcing any law. He was not. He was lynching George Floyd.
Yeah, he was enforcing a code.
Yeah, he was killing him.
Yeah.
In uniform. He was not just. He's now no longer wearing. He's not wearing a white bed sheet, but he's wearing a uniform. He was killing that. Look, when a full-grown man who knows that his mother is dead calls on his mother, that man is in pain, severe pain, and that the person kneeling on his neck kept it. And he was being videotaped. He was being taped, and he actually acted for the camera.
Yeah.
He adjusted his shirt. So Black Studies will let us know that moment is not George Floyd's fault. George Floyd did not cause that death. And Breonna Taylor in Mississippi, she didn't kill herself. Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin.
Trayvon Martin.
Yeah, he didn't kill himself. So the problem is what Black Studies will help us understand that what you are marching for, what we are asking matters. We are asking not because we disregard other lives, not because you have no regard for non-Black lives, but that there is that history has to stop. We know that this man is not enforcing the law. He's committing judicial is killing people.
Extrajudicially.
Oh,
Yeah.
and not killing is the extreme. There are many other ways they do it.
Thank you. I love the fact that you brought up the fact that George Floyd was calling on his mama, which took us back to where we started. You know, well, while he was dying, he still remembered his black mama, on which the burden of slavery, the burden of blackness, and the burden of colonialism has always been on. And on that note, I want to say thank you for joining us on this episode of Legal Angle with Emmanuel Olawale and Dr. Adeeko. This session has been so powerful and informative. I would love to bring you back, because there's so much to talk about.
Anytime, anytime. I'll be willing to talk to you. You are my friend, my buddy, my fellow countryman, my fellow intellectual. I really like the way you approach things, the intellectual approach you give to being an immigrant. I really, really a source of joy and a source of
Thank you.
inspiration to many of us.
Thank,
Keep up the good work.
thank you. For those of you watching us or listening to us, thank you for joining us. Until next time, stay safe.
Thanks.